Hello, everybody. My name is Catherine DiCarlo, and I am Vice President of Admissions and Marketing at Chapel Haven. And I really want to thank you for joining us for this workshop, Getting Ready, Life After High School. We had a very nice response, so we're delighted that you're all able to join us. And so we're going to cover basically three areas. We're going to talk about some tips and strategies while you're still in high school and sort of navigating the high school environment. And then we're going to talk about some life skills-based tips, talk with our parent speakers about things that can happen at home and how parents can still build independence while their young adult is still under their roof. And then Christy Chandler, who's our Director of Admissions, and I are going to, well, actually Christy is going to talk about the different kinds of program options after high school. But along the way, we would love your questions and your participation. So I'm going to turn this over now to Marissa Witkowski-Elder, who's our admissions associate and who is our Zoom wizard. And she's going to give us some quick little notes.
Yeah, so all of you are on mute right now, just to lessen our background noise. But like Catherine said, if you do have questions, feel free to put those in your chat, which you can find at the bottom of your screen. There's a button that you can click to open it, and that will let you type messages to the whole group or to just the presenter. But we will have a time for questions at the end of each section. And we just wanted to let you know this is being recorded so that people can watch this later on in case they missed it. But we just wanted to let you know that. And I'll turn it over to Christy for some introductions of our panelists.
There we go. So welcome again, everybody. So our first panelist is Mary Acquarulo, and she is Chapel Haven's Consulting Director of Education. And we were so fortunate to nab her as a sort of retirement gig. She was most recently the Director of Pupil Services in East Haven, Connecticut, and she's got over 34 years of experience in special education, both as a teacher and as an administrator. So she's going to give you some fantastic school-based tips today. And then our other panelists, we have two parents with us today. So one is Dr. Debbie Carroll. She is a professor of psychology at Southern Connecticut State University, and she has two daughters who are on the autism spectrum, one of whom is in our ASAP program, our Asperger's Syndrome Adult Transition Program. And Debbie's been doing amazing parent workshops for many years now. So she's got some excellent strategies for preparing your child to transition into young adulthood at home and beyond. And then we also have Pat Stavola with us, another parent, a Chapel Haven parent. And Pat is the family support coordinator for the Connecticut Family Support Network. And so she also hosts a lot of parent support groups and did a lot to help prepare James to get ready to make his transition out into young adulthood as well. And so we are also fortunate to have James with us, who is a first-year student in our REACH program and came ready to start Chapel Haven with some fantastic experiences already under his belt and is just doing wonderful in the program. And then we also have Jessica Lerman with us. So Jessica Lerman is a New York lady. She came to us most recently from Maplebrook School, but is from Long Island originally. And she's a first-year student in our ASAP program, our Asperger's Syndrome Adult Transition Program. So James and Jessica will also be sharing some about things they did to get ready for a transition to Chapel Haven and to beyond as well. So please feel free to pick the brains of all these fantastic folks that are with us today.
Okay, so the first part of our presentation is with Mary Acquarulo, who is going to share tips while you're still in the high school years. So Mary, we're going to turn it over to you.
Okay, hi. One of the things that's sometimes difficult for families is beginning the discussion about life after high school when your child is several years to go still in high school and you're away from that piece of life. The transition portion of the IEP and the PPT process is designed to address the areas that will begin at age 15 and continue during the rest of the high school setting. For students on the autism spectrum, that has now been changed so that the process now begins at not later than the date on which the first IEP takes effect for a child who is at least 14. So that just changed in July last year. What I'd like to do today is discuss two parts of the IEP and two related documents. All the information that I will be sharing can be found on the Connecticut State Department of Education website under the Special Education tab. Because I've participated in hundreds of PPT meetings, I realize that many times there are so many documents and so much information being shared that some things are not reviewed at the actual meeting. That being said, I'd like to take a look at some of the information on page 6 of the IEP. When you look at page 6, this is the transition planning page. So a lot of times when we're in a PPT meeting, I find that we kind of review progress, and then we jump into the goals and objectives and talk about how this year has gone and what's ready for next year. But this is a very important piece for our students. If a student is not yet 15 or 14 on the spectrum, then this page is not applicable, and that's all that happens with this. Section number 2 discusses student preferences, and that's really important. The students are invited to attend the meeting and are encouraged to do so. Sometimes students are not comfortable attending, and you can have situations where your child may attend for part of a meeting and then leave. And we try to work on that, at least have them come for part of the meeting and maybe say a few words of things that they're interested in, because all the transition planning pieces are based on their interest and where they think they want to be going, with the PPT support to kind of tender that plan. So number 2 discusses that about student preferences, and if the student doesn't attend, they kind of have a way to do that. Sometimes they may tell somebody and somebody will document that for them. If you look at the section on age, number 3, age appropriate transition assessments, throughout their time at high school and late middle school, there should be assessments being done to see if the interests and the preferences and the skills are kind of matching up, so that we can kind of make some decisions in that direction. Agency participation, for some students, they're involved with BRS or DOORS or other agencies. No outside agency can be invited unless a parent says it's okay to do so. So that's kind of where that piece goes. Number 5 discusses post-school outcome goal statements. And this piece gets a little confusing. What it's supposed to do is guess where the student will be when they get out of high school and make a statement related to that. So as opposed to saying something like, I'll use my name, Mary. Mary will investigate options for post-secondary education. It makes a statement as if it's to be. Mary will attend a 2-year training program or a 2-year college upon completion of high school. So that's how it's supposed to be stated, as if it's actually happening. Based on those post-school outcome goal statements, there are to be goals and objectives within the IEP that are related to that. So it gets a little confusing in this area. There has to be one for employment, and there has to be one for post-secondary education or training. As far as the community participation and the independent living piece, that's student specific or dependent. It's not appropriate for every student to have that in their IEP, so the PPT decides for whom that is appropriate. Number 6 relates to that and discusses the fact that some students are still taking their academic classes in general ed, and some are only taking, they're specifically working on transition now. They finished their high school coursework and they are completing just the courses with the IEP related to transition. Another thing I want to point out there is number 7, because sometimes that gets to be a surprise for people, which is at 18, the rights to IDEA transfer to the student unless the parent has obtained guardianship. And that's just something that we remind people along the way, that that will automatically happen unless it doesn't happen. So those are some comments on page 6, which is a page that sometimes gets missed in the meeting, but is very important for our students that are within this age level and for whom these things are being discussed. I'd also like to point out some things from page 10 on the IEP, which is a little bit of special criteria, factors, and the top few things may have to do with certain students that are on behavior plans, have limited English proficiency, visual impairments, hearing impairments, things like that. But if you look at the section in the middle that talks about progress reporting, that's one thing. Depending on how your school is set up, for us, it's usually, we follow the high school schedule. So quarterly, we report on progress on goals and objectives for IEPs. And you should be looking for those things to come to tell you how your student's doing related to all the goals and objectives that have been in the IEP. And don't forget, those are written for a whole year. So in the first quarter of the year, you will not be addressing all those goals and objectives. You will be moving along during the year. But I want to point out to you the exit criteria block on this page, because there are different options for exit criteria, and it applies to every special ed student, not just students being exited. It's an anticipated criteria to be used in the future to determine when the student no longer requires special education. So it's kind of a guess at some point, but there are various options. And one is the ability to succeed in regular ed without special ed support. One is graduation, and the other is age 21. Once in a while, there's something else there that you can fill in the other category. But just be aware of that piece to start to talk with your team about, so when do you think my child will be exited from special ed? If they are able to do all general ed classes with no support, when they complete their high school requirements and graduate, or is this a student for whom we will be looking at something a little longer and they may be part of an 18 to 21-year-old program, whether it's wherever it is. So those are all the options there. I also want to point out on the bottom, number 2, the Parents Transition Bill of Rights has been provided to parents. So like you get procedural safeguards with your PPT invitation or at the meeting, they're offered, and most times parents say, I already have multiple copies of this. There is a document called the Transition Bill of Rights, and we are going to talk about that a little bit next. But in many school districts, that first box is checked, which says is available on the school district website. And I know for me personally, sometimes when things say that, I don't always get to go to the website and look at things. So I want to make you aware of the Transition Bill of Rights because it's important, and it really is written to the student and what the student's rights are when they're transitioning, but it will start to focus on those things. So here you see the top of the Transition Bill of Rights, and it is explained that under federal and state law, there are rights for parents and students receiving special ed, and there are specific rights that are available for students who are involved in transition. And they always will get these. It's supposed to be annually received and discussed. I know it happens annually. I don't know that it's always discussed, but one of the things I suggest is going over these and discussing them with the students, with families, with students, to just see exactly what the rights are. So if we start to look at what some of the things are in the Transition Bill of Rights, we'll start to talk about students with an IEP and what they have the rights to. And the first one is to receive secondary transition services, starting at whatever age is appropriate based on their disability category, and to receive appropriate individualized instruction through the end of the school year in which they turn 21 or until graduation with a regular high school diploma. So for some students, they do receive services from the school system until they're 21. Others leave after high school, and others leave along the way between graduation and that age 21. And that ties back to what I was speaking about on page 10, that exit criteria also. Just for purposes of reinforcement, a school year is considered July 1st through June 30th. So if a student is receiving services through age 21 and they turn 21 at some point in a school year, they will receive services through June 30th. They don't end on their 21st birthday. Students have a right to attend all PPT meetings, and sometimes that's kind of a family discussion, encouragement. You know, sometimes we worry as families about how students will feel being in the PPT, but the more students attend, the more they can participate and really be a part of the discussion and make their needs and concerns be addressed. And if there are parts of the meeting where students don't want to stay, even at the level where we are at Chapel Haven, then they ask to be dismissed, and we have that happen. But the more you participate, the more you are getting your needs out there. Number 5 goes back to that post-secondary outcome goal statements that we were talking about on page 6 of the IEP. So the thing that's important is it talks about realistic and specific post-school outcome goals, because for some students, we want to work with them. It's not going to a 4-year university may be an appropriate post-school outcome for some students and not for all. And so we want to always work with what we think is appropriate, but still within the desires of the student. And we really try to enforce all those types of things and really respect their understanding and their request for things that they want to do when they get out. And that goes along with the education piece and with the employment piece. A lot of talking about what is it that you want to do? What do you see 5 years from now? What do you see in your long-term future? Excuse me for 1 second. Sorry. So we also talk about the right to receive secondary transition services, and those areas of employment and post-secondary are required. Independent living is if appropriate. And if you're feeling that independent living is an area where your student needs support from the school system, then those are areas that you should really discuss at the PPT and bring up and discuss why you feel that piece. If you look at number 7, which I will be talking about next, there is something called the Connecticut Core Transition Skills. And that's a set of skills related to this whole thing that there's a task force that has developed. So I will talk about that. Number 8 talks a little bit about looking at the outside agencies that can be involved in support. Number 9 goes back to talking about the rights transfer at 18, so that especially at year 17, we remind students and families that something has to happen with guardianship if those rights are not to transfer. Otherwise, it's automatic. And for most of the PPTs that I've been in, whether the rights transfer or not, the student and the family still tend to attend the PPTs together. So, but it's just, you know, a legal piece has to happen so that we know who to invite to the PPTs, who to address things to, and that's just the age that it has to happen at. If you look at number 10, it starts to talk about the right to request consideration for receiving transition-only services. And that's where the 18 to 21 type programs start looking at, we're done with the coursework, not all functional coursework because that ties into the transition skills, but we're done with the high school requirements for graduation, and we're really going to take a look at the services between 18 and 21 that look at employment, post-secondary, and if appropriate, look at the independent living skills. And there's a set of things that are written out related to that, as far as academic requirements are met, The PPT kind of has that conversation and talks about the fact that it should be transition only. It's got to be a coordinated set of activities with an end goal. It's, you know, you don't just do things for the sake of doing them. The goal is always to provide the most time with non-disabled peers. Here it says 80%, and for many students that is how that works. For some students it's more difficult to get to the 80% than others. Students participating in graduation activities, and students getting their diploma, and there's a whole set of things about holding the diploma. So students many times march with their graduating class, but their diploma is held until they've completed things if the school system is still going to be involved. Once you receive your diploma, the school system is no longer involved. So there's a whole little piece of legislation related to that. But many of the students do walk with their graduating class. Sometimes that's the way students agree to stay in school longer and continue to participate in the 18 to 21 program by participating in the graduation. Usually around at the senior year, those transition services are really set up and designed going forward, so everybody kind of knows what's happening that senior year and where we're going after that. Students in public school have student success plans in grades 6 through 12, and our students are involved in participating in that. And then I didn't have the whole list put here, but there are many transition resources on the Connecticut State Department of Education website about assistive technology, transition manual for students, those core transition skills, things for families. So one of the things I really always suggest is that people go to the Connecticut State Department of Education website. They take a look under special education. There's a tab that says resources for families, and there's a lot of really good stuff in there. And there's especially a section on transition. So those are the Transition Bill of Rights. And what's mentioned in there, and I'd also like to discuss, is a page from the core Connecticut Core Transition Skills. This is a 3-page document that you'll find on the website. And the Transition Task Force that put this together felt that it was a list of the areas that all students with disabilities really should be addressing in their program in order to be successful after high school. This document is dated January 2016, and these are the areas that task force felt for every student would be important to have included in their IEP plan, so that the students can do the following things to the best of their ability: explain their disability and their individual needs, utilize self-determination skills, strengthen their self-esteem and social emotional awareness, assist with the development of their IEP, attend, participate in, and facilitate their own PPT meeting. I've seen some really nice PPT meetings done where the student speaks before anybody else speaks at the PPT. You know, somebody will do all the introductions and then they turn over to the student and say, so-and-so, tell us how it's going. Tell us how your year is going. And then the student really has the voice at the beginning of the PPT. Demonstrate leadership skills, if those are skills that students have. Describe their rights and responsibilities. Accept responsibility for independence and activities of daily living, which are important, very important. Social interactions, skills to access appropriate physical and mental health care on their own, skills for community resources, skills for appropriate post-secondary education and training, the skills for appropriate employment to meet their needs. And if you really think about a lot of the things in here, it's a lot of what all that transition skills work is based on. What do the students need to be able to do to be independent in those 3 areas when they leave the educational setting? And if they don't have all the things, are they ready to leave? And that's really the discussion that's important at the PBT table. And to identify and ask for accommodations needed. Our students leave the IEP process and they go on to post-secondary education where IEPs do not exist. And one of the things that's really important for students is they really have to advocate for themselves when they get there. And will they know how to do that? Because at the post-secondary level, the skills are provided at a different level. Accessing appropriate independent transportation, whether students drive or they take public transportation, or, you know, it's 2020, they use Uber and Lyft and other things like that, and knowing how to do that. And being able to use technology to enhance what's going on either in the community for learning or for employment. So those are skills, as we get into the rest of this meeting, that are part of a lot of the things we're going to be talking about, and how to really work on those areas with our students, the families that have done it, the different programs that are out there. So those are the areas that I wanted to talk to the participants about today, about things to really be looking at while your students are still in school. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. And Mary is a very, very experienced semi-retired pupil personnel director. And what she does for us at Chapel Haven, partly one of the things she does is oversee the IEPs of adults between the ages of 18 and 21 who are attending Chapel Haven on their IEPs. Are there any questions from anyone in the audience? I guess this would be a time to unmute everyone, Marissa, and see anyone have a question for Mary that might be dealing with high school stuff?
I think it's probably easiest if you want to type that in the chat. That way people don't accidentally talk over each other. But I don't see any in there right now.
Okay. Well, everyone will be in place throughout. So when we're done with the presenting part of this, we're happy to also take questions, and you can put them in the chat throughout. All right, so the next part of our presentation focuses on some of the things that you can be doing at home. And this is when I'm going to call upon our panelists to help with this part of the presentation. So the next slide shows you some of the things that we are working on at Chapel Haven. So think about us as the age 18 and over set. A lot of our instruction will be geared around life skills at Chapel Haven, things such as our students learning to make their own meals every day in our apartment setting, learning how to plan out a grocery list for the week and do the shopping, and also manage the money that goes with that. Students are drawing down from a $500 a month stipend and learning to go to the bank and budget. They're learning how to maintain their apartments and do rotating chores, and then learning how to get around the community safely. So I think I'm going to ask Pat and James and Dr. Carroll if they can talk a little bit about how this rolled out with them in the high school years and any tips that you guys might have. So let's start with Pat.
Okay, great. Yeah, we were looking, James attended a transition program with our town in Glastonbury called the Links Transition Program.
Yeah, Links
Transition Program. And we worked very closely with them on what we wanted to see James do. Regarding like cooking, James did much better working with the school on cooking than he did at home, because a lot of times he would get bored or tired, or I would interrupt and take over, something like that. Or he'd get bored and he'd just kind of wander away rather than following directions. So he did much better at school. Also, what happened with school cooking was James, when in the transition program, when they would cook something, James would eat it no matter what it was, pretty much, because he was cooking it with other people. If I made something here that he was unfamiliar with, he wouldn't touch it. So it really opened him up to a much larger food palette than he had previously. What do you think, James?
Yeah, it's true. I mean, I'll be honest, when I was much younger, I was a bit skeptic about foods that are unfamiliar to me. But as time went on, I slowly but surely tried new foods, and all of a sudden, I'm actually more open to try new things, like the food at Bear's Smokehouse, and let's say pepperoni pizza. I like Caesar salad.
Okay, we don't.
I'm also a bit adventurous with spices.
Right. He's been very adventurous with spices. And when he cooks his breakfast and his eggs, it's something I wouldn't touch, but he loves it. So, and so with cooking, that was something that he did not really excel with me. And I think it had more to do with me than it did with this, my particular issues with cooking and having my kitchen clean and things like that. So he actually did very well with the school with that, and he's working on that. He continues to work on that at Chapel Haven, and hopefully he'll continue and get better with that. Grocery shopping. What we did with grocery shopping, I actually started that early with taking him with me, of course, on grocery shopping trips and starting out with a list and having him go get particular items. And something that happened, it wasn't actually James, this was actually his younger brother. I sent him in to get something one time, one item, and I just kind of figured he knew how to get it. It never occurred to me that he didn't know there were signs in each aisle that showed him what was in the aisles, because he just wandered up and down every aisle and couldn't find what he wanted because he got tired of it and stopped before he got to what he needed. And so I waited for about 10 minutes. I had sent him in alone in the car. I waited about 10 minutes, and I went in. I found him wandering the aisles, and I said, "You don't know where to get this?" I said, "Did you know that there are signs in each aisle that tell you what's in?" And he goes, "Oh!" It never occurred to me that he didn't know that. The other good thing that I did with James and with his brother is take them to different grocery stores, because every grocery store is set up differently. So have them learn in different grocery stores how to shop.
I mean, like at Whole Foods, there's a pizza place, there's a bakery, and there's also a place where you could get almost any type of food imaginable.
So by the time James got to Chapel Haven, he already knew how to grocery shop pretty well. And he was paying with his EBT card or with my credit card, which he knew how to do. One thing Chapel Haven's done for him is he's been working with cash again, which he hadn't done in a long time. So that was a good reminder for him.
Mm-hmm.
Apartment maintenance, I more or less left that up to Chapel Haven. He did know how to do certain things. He knew how to do his laundry, which we started when he was in high school. And that was, we had a couple of different ways of working in that. At first, he had to have me there when he started his laundry, so I could be sure he didn't put way too much soap in the washer and gum up the works, or overload it. That was the other thing, stuff everything in there. But that's a typical thing. I had that with my other kids as well. I have 4 young adults, and all of them did the same thing. They would stuff everything they had in there. They would put too much soap in.
Well, that's probably because they want to get as much laundry as you can.
Right.
using less loads.
Okay.
So teaching that, and of course that goes by machine. I remember when I started teaching James to do his laundry, and I offered to my oldest son, who was going off to college the next year, I said, "I should be teaching you how to do it too." And he said, "Mom, I can read the back of the Tide bottle. I know how to do laundry. I just don't want to." So it's a very typical behavior.
That's a typical of it.
Mm-hmm.
But James
And
did
like
learn to do his own laundry, and he's been doing it ever since. Yes?
Yeah.
Any questions?
Well, I wanted to see if Jessica, if we can have her chime in here and talk about your experience in high school and what were some things that you were doing to get ready for life after high school?
Well, I went to a school called Maplebrook,
Mhm.
and with that school, we pretty much did a lot of the things I do now.
Mm-hmm.
Like, for instance, they teach us how to do life skills, how to like cook for people. So a lot of the skills I do here, I practiced at Maplebrook and at home as well.
And did you also do a sleepaway camp?
Yes, I actually did a sleepaway camp for about 4 years.
Like from what age to what age?
Well, I tried doing it at the age of 10, but it wasn't a good time for me.
Mm-hmm.
So I took about a year or two off, and then I tried it again.
Mm-hmm. And what is the value of sleepaway camp, do you think? Does it help you
Just
learn?
to help you learn how to not always rely on your parents
Mm-hmm.
and how to kind of have some type of independence.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Good. Some other things that you can be working on and that we would continue to work on in the post-high school setting would be mobility. So that's learning how to get around a community, how to take the bus, how to walk, how to navigate safely, how to be in a store. We talked a little bit about making purchases, waiting for your change. Also, how to spend time without mom and dad, either at home or out in the community in a social way, and then the sleepaway camp. So let's go over to Debbie Carroll, because I know that Debbie has had, in fact, she gave a workshop at Chapel Haven and has really practical advice in this area.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. So I love what I'm hearing, and I want to really speak to families, not just the transitioning student here, but parents as well, because everybody is transitioning, not just our young adult. The parents and the family are also transitioning. And so as we move past high school, we have to change our mindset of our child as our child. We have to see them as a capable person, and it's difficult. And our sort of first rescue and save. So safety should be your first concern always. I mean, you know your child, you know what their safety level is. Can they go out in the community alone and be safe? Can they communicate? Can they call for help? So that has to be the first concern. But once you're sure that they're safe, and there has to be a plan A, B, C, and D, to also push yourself a little bit. So challenge within their limits, your young adult. I started with money at a young age with my children with gift cards. If you're afraid they're going to lose cash, or credit cards can be stolen, debit cards are a bigger risk, because if a debit card is stolen, someone can wipe out your bank account. So I started with gift cards. If they lose a $10 gift card, okay, so what? It's a lesson. They've lost the money. Don't replace the money. There has to be consequences, but it's not a lot. When you do set up credit cards and bank accounts, I put limits on them. So it's not a default, but you can talk to your bank and you can get a credit card with $100 limit, so that if it is lost, you're not going to lose thousands of dollars and things like that. So definitely using money in the community. Time management. Make your young person responsible for getting themselves up in the morning for school, getting their homework. They can ask for help and you can help, but don't rescue. If they oversleep, let them go to the principal and tell them they want to get in late, so make them responsible. Transportation. My youngest daughter does now drive, and she didn't before high school. My older one does not, but this mom said when they were 18, you don't have to drive, but you have to get yourself places. There's free travel training available through the Kennedy Center and other places. So, learn to take the bus, get an Uber account, do a Lyft, taxis, whatever it is. But again, don't take them everywhere. If they want to get to their friend's house, that's a good motivation. You can go to your friends, but you got to get yourself there, or arrange for yourself to get there. At home, laundry's a big one. I mean, they can do their own laundry, and if their clothes are dirty, don't rescue. If they want to wear something and it's not clean, oh, well, they should have done the laundry. They can wear it dirty. They can do the laundry. But it's hard not to rescue. Cooking is tough too, because I'm like Pat. I want my kitchen clean. My youngest daughter does not like to cook. She's learning, but don't make breakfast. If they miss one meal, they're not going to starve to death. So start with, you make your own breakfast, or you pack your own lunch, or once a week on Friday nights, you make dinner. And if they don't do it, they don't do it, but don't rush in and order the pizza for them. The consequences piece is really important. And really I trust that you can do this, and I know it's hard, and I don't want to always cook or clean either, but if you don't do it, guess what? You don't eat. Not any yelling, or it's just the natural consequence of not having done it. Even healthcare, I started my girls with, your major medical appointments, you definitely want them to get there. But like the dermatologist, let them make the appointment, let them get themselves there. If they miss the appointment, then they need to call and say, I'm going to miss it. And, if you miss a dermatology appointment, or, a minor, whatever, it's not going to be the end of the world. Don't rescue that, let the consequence happen. And I think also being able to communicate for themselves. Are they good with their cell phone? Can they respond to their emails? If they are in an unsafe place, can they get out of it safely? I know I had put in my girls' wallet when they were younger, they're older now, but we had a card that said, I have autism, and sometimes in an emergency, I can't respond appropriately, so please call, these are my parents' names and numbers, please call this number. And I said, if you're with a police officer, a fireman, or whatever, you're in a dangerous situation, you hand that to the nearest person in uniform if you can't speak for yourself. So you want to put those things in place, and it's going to be, it's scary. Getting out of high school is very scary for a young person. It's very scary for you as a parent. It's okay. It's scary. And you're going to have really good days and really bad days. You're going to think they're never going to be able to do anything. You think, oh my God, they're doing so great. And it's a roller coaster. So buckle up, go along for the ride. And I always tell my kids, it's not necessarily a roller coaster, it's a spiral staircase, because you feel like you're going around in circles, but you actually are slowly moving up. It just feels like circles, and you're not alone. Reach out to other people in your community, in your transition program. If your high school, ours was not particularly supportive, reach out to those other agencies and communities. Don't take no for an answer when you really need to get a yes. And we teach our children that too.
I wonder too, can I ask a question, Catherine? Debbie and Pat, I wonder if you could comment. Sometimes what I hear from families whenever they're doing things like you guys were talking about, like in your kitchens to stay clean. And I think sometimes as parents, like maybe we get it in our minds, if it's not the way I do it, that's not the right way. But like, is there some room there where you can do it at maybe a different level of expectation and that still be a success for you? So I don't know if you guys have a comment or two about that.
I do, and I have, my older daughter now has her own apartment, and so I think a way to think about it in your own house is that this is their space too. It's your family space. It's not your space, and so you almost have to get in a mindset for, I'm visiting my daughter's kitchen right now, and this is how she does things, and this is how she keeps it. And when she goes to bed, I'll fix it. Right? But in the moment, it is a shared space, and such that we have to transition. If you want to have an independent person, you have to give them space to be independent. Otherwise, you're still in charge, and you're teaching them that you're in charge. So, and it's not easy for moms and dads.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
I agree
And when
completely.
Sorry.
I agree completely, Deb. There's a difference between they're clean and mom clean. And again, that goes with all my kids, not just my children with disabilities. So in my kitchen, I may redo something after they do it, and they might look at me and roll their eyes and say, I did that, yeah, I know. Well, but when they're on their own, like when I visit James at Chapel Haven, I generally try not to comment on what I might see as a dirty table, or not quite wiped as well as I would have liked, or his bedroom. So I try not to comment. I don't comment too much on their bedrooms here at home. That's their space.
Mm-hmm.
And here the boys had the basement as a setup for their PlayStation and their Nintendo and stuff like that. I don't comment too often on that. Once in a while, if it gets to the point where I can't walk through there, I will make them clean it up. But that's their space. They are adults. If that's the way they want to live, so be it. I do draw the line at them bringing food or anything like that down there, because that I won't put up with.
Yeah.
Same thing with their bedrooms. No food in the bedrooms.
Yeah, when I say the health department would condemn this place, we have a problem.
Well, that's all excellent. And Pat did put in the chat that, and it's something we all forget, is that the young adults should memorize their own phone number. And a lot of times we have everything on such automatic with our phones that, like, I couldn't even tell you right now what my son's phone number is because it's so automatic. But
And not just their number, but hopefully one parent's number or whoever their emergency person is, if they can memorize it, because if they lose their phone or their phone doesn't have power, that could be an issue.
And then I remember Debbie had a great tip at our workshop about having more than one emergency contact, like a family friend or somebody, right, Debbie?
Yes, I'd say have a collection. I remember one time my older daughter, we were actually out of state, and the train was shut down, and she couldn't get home from work. And she actually called a family friend and very calmly said, "This is my problem. I'm not sure what to do." And the family friend said, "I'm coming to get you." But she had a number of people that she could call who knew ahead of time that she was their emergency person. But I was so proud of her because she had a really great script, and she was able to articulate, even though she was emotional, where she was and what she needed, and that she wasn't sure what to do. And so, yeah, I mean, enlist family, friends, neighbors, whoever it is. They're often very happy to help. It's us that don't want to ask them.
Yeah. This slide talks about the importance of some employment experience or some volunteering experience, especially in the high school years. So I'm going to ask James, what was your experience with jobs before you came to Chapel Haven?
Jobs. Let's see. I worked at Gainwell's Custodial, TJ Maxx, Chili's.
You volunteered at the food bank.
And I volunteered at the food bank. Let's see. What else?
Did you
He volunteered at the food bank on his own. I brought him there. We drove him there and back because it was right up the street. But he did it on his own. He applied, and then he went, and they worked with him for maybe the first week, and then he did it all on his own for the rest of the summer that he was there.
And what about your job at Chili's, James? Did you enjoy that?
Mostly involves dishwashing, food prep, and maintenance. I mean, getting everything all cleaned up, especially the parking lot, because people just decided that the parking lot would be a nice, good substitute trash can. I mean,
James actually worked at Chili's for pay when he left. When he finished his transition program, they hired him. And he worked there for about 6 months. Not quite 6 months. And until he went to Chapel Haven.
It says like 4 months.
4 or 5 months.
So that was some excellent experience, right?
Yes, it was a very good experience. And he could have stayed there. They were perfectly willing. I mean, they loved him there. He was doing a good job. They had moved him up. So he was working he started at, I think, 2 days a week. For 3 or 4 hours, and then he moved up to about 30 hours a week. So he was working pretty much full time, and he would have stayed there, but he had the choice of either staying there or going to Chapel Haven. So that was his choice.
Yeah, and actually sometimes I'd work the late shift one day and then work the early shift the next morning. So I'd only get like 5 hours of sleep.
And how did you get there?
I Ubered.
In the early morning, he had to Uber because no one wanted to get up and drive. I mean, he was working at 7 in the morning. He had to be there at 7, so it was pretty early.
Yeah, to wake up at 5, which, to be honest, it kind of made me feel like I felt I don't know, awful and tired, sleepy.
Because he would work till 11 or 12 the night before, and then he had to work the morning shift. So he was learning that it's not all roses when you work.
Right. And Jessica, did you do some volunteering in your high school years?
Yes, I did quite a bit actually.
Give us an idea of
Um,
some of the things you did.
I've worked with kids. I've worked in in a nursing home. I even once learned how to do hair. So it's just different things.
Was that a good experience for you, do you think, to get you ready for where you are now?
Definitely.
Mm-hmm. I would think so too. So in the interest of time, we're going to move to the final part of the talk, which Christy will walk us through some of the types of programs that are available after high school. And then we'll double back and see what questions our participants have.
All right, so we'll move through these quickly. So basically just letting you know that there are a range of options after high school that you can consider. So Marissa, if you want to do our first slide there. So there's day programs. So day programs would be something literally you go to during the day, you go back home at night. Depending on the day program, you know, they've got different focuses. Some like our community life program at Chapel Haven are very volunteer and community oriented. Others might be focused more around staying at a central campus space and having social activities, art type activities that they do together. So just a couple of local ones that are listed there. I do want to double back on what Debbie was saying about the Kennedy Center being a great resource for travel training. So little local shout out to them there. And then from day programs, I listed DOORS here, which I realized after I put this slide that they have changed their acronym yet again. They used to be the Bureau of Rehabilitative Services, and then they became the Department of Rehabilitative Services. And now I believe they are called the Department on Aging and Disability Services. So I guess they're DADS now, but essentially they are a state agency that if you have a diagnosed disability, they are able to work with you to provide some paid vocational assessments and then work with you to locate a job. I have heard, you know, mixed results from various families in terms of the timeline and how that can all work, but it is definitely a resource that's available. And then there are, you know, local colleges, again, not residential, so just going during the day. But some of those, like Gateway Community College has something called the Step Forward program. Norwalk Community College has some options as well. And so typically programs like that are a mixture of some life skills, some vocational skills, and sometimes some modified college classes to help students get that college experience and kind of get acclimated to the college environment, maybe without that level of college level academic intensity yet. And then we've got programs like Chapel Haven. So we're a post-secondary program, we're residential, we provide 24/7 supervision. Franklin Academy is another local one. Glen Home School is a therapeutic version of that. So that offers adults a way to live in a setting where they can day in and day out be practicing and living simultaneously all those skills that they need to learn. And then probably beyond that, there are definitely college programs out there. So where the students would live at college, they would be doing college level academics in a lot of settings. Sometimes there's still some modified academics. A lot of times there's a very heavy use of peer mentors in these programs, but then they do typically have some kind of staff advisor that assists them as well. So like the TAMES program there at Mitchell College, that's definitely all about getting you ready for going on to pursue college full-time after that. Whereas the REACH program at College of Charleston is really designed to provide a college experience in a very peer-centric way with some modified academics and courses that are available. So there are a lot of options out there. It's good to start exploring those earlier. You know, Mary talked earlier about at 14 and 15, that official process starting with the PPT team, but definitely, you know, by the time your young adult is at like 16 or so, starting to explore what's out there. That way you're giving yourself plenty of time to attend open houses, you know, very low stakes, first exploratory steps to see what's out there. And as you start doing those campus visits, you really want to be keeping in mind kind of these next few slides here. So like, what is the goal? Like, do you want your child to have a college experience, even if that's just a short term, you know, maybe 1 or 2 year thing? Or are you looking for a setting where they can you know, develop everything they need and then be a part of a long-term community? So you want to be, you know, targeting what your goal is for your young adult with what the outcomes of the program are supposed to be. And then how are you going to measure success? So not just success on the individual level, meaning like, are there going to be goals and objectives? Are there assessments? How are these outcomes being communicated to families and other stakeholders? But then also program success too. So is this a program that's accredited, or are they an approved transition program through the Board of Education? So looking at, you know, benchmarks for success for programs as well is a really important piece. And then the peer group. So definitely, you know, I think this is such a crucial part of all the programs, because if a student doesn't feel like they don't belong, it's not going to work out, you know. So considering like how wide the range of peers are, and are there students within that group that have similar interests and that have similar levels of sociability, so that your student feels like, yeah, this is a place where I really belong. And are there going to be opportunities for those friendships to go beyond when they're directly involved in the program? So, you know, even if it's a day program, like, are there ways for them to connect outside of that? But certainly if you're looking at a residential program, you know, is there a way to foster those social connections and relationships and to keep that ongoing for the long term? Okay, so that was your super speedy version of program options and next steps. I've been seeing the chat box light up and I haven't had a chance to look at those. So Marissa or Catherine, if you've seen some of those, we can certainly start answering those.
Can we go to Diane? She has a question. And while we're going to her, her question is, what would a transition program look like for a student who is not reading, writing at grade level, but does not have vocational interests?
Mary, would you want to chime in on that one? Is Mary still with us?
She is. We have to
unmute. Oh, here we go.
No, I'm Diane.
Hi, Diane. I think you still have to take a look at the 2 areas of employment and post-secondary. Even if it's the volunteer work type piece of it, but the student doesn't have any interest in what is the goal? What does the student want to do?
Of course, gaming. He wants to have his own business and write gaming programs, but he's not doing well in programming class.
Okay, because that, I mean, there's a goal there that, you know, there could be research done related to what would it involve? What do I need to do? What kind of training do I need? What kind of skills do I need? If he's not reading, you know, there would be somebody that could kind of take a look at that with him as to if he can participate in a training program that doesn't require reading. It might be a little difficult there.
Yeah, because they have to have, you know, be able to write well, which he can't.
Right. And maybe sometimes the investigation piece of the program is what leads the student to see that maybe that isn't the best goal down the road. That's a hard piece, but sometimes that's how it has to play out, so that the student sees that I really want to do this. I mean, it happens to us also. I really want to do this, but what I can do doesn't really match up with the desired outcome. And maybe in small steps without being discouraging. You know, the thing that's hard is you don't want to get in a position where you say, well, you can't do that, because that's a discouraging kind of answer, as opposed to, let's take a look at it and see what you need to do to get there. And then maybe along the line, try to have those conversations in a kind of gentle way.
And also sometimes too, Mary, would you say that like if you're able to dig below the surface of what a student says a little bit, that maybe you can kind of get to a smaller kernel that is more achievable than maybe what that big out there goal seems like. And then you can find something like parallel, you know, to get them plugged into.
Right, something related, but not necessarily what the original long-term outcome goal was. I agree.
And then Debbie, did you have some advice on that?
No, I think stepping is a great plan because I mean, gaming is a big field and there's lots of places to get engaged in that. But start someplace small, maybe, you know, maybe even working at a gaming store.
Right.
Right.
Might be a
I like
start.
that.
Yeah. How about Lisa? Would you like to ask your question, Lisa? I have you unmuted.
I think I can kind of see Lisa's summarizing of like residential is maybe a little too out there financially right now. So like what might be some other options to get some help? Yeah, so Debbie commented that, you know, there are some state agencies that might be able to provide some support, but that, you know, day program, and she's right, like Debbie's daughter is a day student and is taking part in a few different day programs that are, you know, really matching up with her needs very well. I will also say that one of the benefits or the silver linings, maybe I should say, not a benefit, that's come out of this whole COVID-19 quarantine is that Chapel Haven now has an online curriculum available, not just to current Chapel Haven students, but that will be available to anybody who wants to take part in it. And that will be considerably less expensive than a full residential tuition will be. So I would definitely say don't discount either one, the day or the online options, because they do provide very meaningful learning opportunities still.
And then Mary, do you find, I find that a lot of families, a lot of parents aren't aware that they can stay on the IEP past the age of 18, that sometimes maybe they're in a little rush to have their child walk or their young adult walk across that graduation stage. And I don't know if you want to comment on that.
I do find that sometimes, I think sometimes those decisions are student directed. Sometimes I have found that sometimes students are kind of the ones that insist that they don't stay and get any more services. They want to be done because everybody else is being done. But I think that's why the importance of having those conversations early and having the conversations are about what the outcome, what the expected outcome, and what transition skills is that student having, so that the whole team is kind of looking at it together as a group.
I'd like to comment.
Kind of supporting the student in there. Go ahead, Deb.
I'd like to comment on that too, because not every school district will also will let your child stay easily. So I experienced that twice. So just to remind parents and students, you are a member of the PPT team, whether you're treated that way or not. And everything is negotiable. Don't take no for an answer. If you're asking for to have graduation delayed or to stay for services and you're initially told no, don't take no. You have rights, and the State Department of Education, special education in particular, I have found very helpful. You call for assistance, you ask them what you do, and they'll tell you. I had to fight 2 school districts for my daughters, and they got their transition programming, not easily. One of them, I didn't even need an attorney. We just kept fighting and we got it. The other one, I unfortunately did have to hire an attorney eventually, but we were successful. So don't give in easily. If your child needs services and they are willing to accept them, you know, don't take no for an answer if you need a yes.
And some potential
a lot of it is the having the knowledge, and that's why the 2 things, the Transition Bill of Rights and the Connecticut Core Transition Skills, if you educate yourself on some of those things, you can speak to my child isn't ready because, you know, you always have to be prepared for the why, you know, why are you asking for continued services? Well, I'm asking for continued services because in this area, my child doesn't have these skills that we were looking to work on.
And
I
there
think
are
that's
several
important.
organizations and nonprofits too that can help you with learning. So like CPAC, the Connecticut Parent Advocacy Center, PAT and the Connecticut Family Support Network. There's an organization called FAVOR, FAVOR. There's ASRC. So those all have different family resources to help you learn about that process. And oftentimes I have people like Debbie and Pat, you know, who've been through those experiences personally and can share what they've learned too.
Mm-hmm. Anything from Pat? Any other tips maybe that we didn't hit on, or?
She was having technical difficulties, so we may have lost her.
Okay. Yeah, I can't always see everyone. All right. Well, we want to thank our panel, especially, and Jessica, we thank you, and James, and Debbie and Pat and Mary for joining us, and we thank everybody in the audience. And we will be following up with this recording of this presentation, and you're welcome to reach out to any of us. And if you want to connect with any of these panelists, just let us know. Everyone has been very generous with their time and is always willing to talk to parents. And thank you so much.